Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Jen. I make videos about motherhood, about Montessori, about gentle parenting. We do cloth diapers and floor beds and stuff like that. So if any of that is of interest to you, then I would love if you subscribe to my channel for more videos. And in today's video, I want to talk about how I have successfully breastfed my baby past a year. He's 14 months now and we're still going, and just some tips I have to keep that I use to keep my supply up, as well as how I knew that I didn't have a low supply, because I feel like I kind of thought I did, and it can be a little bit tricky, especially as a first-time mom. There's a lot of things that seem like you have a low supply when you don't actually. So those are just a few of the topics I'm going to cover today. I want to put a disclaimer before I start that I understand not all of these tips and things that have worked for me will work for every family. I know that it can be hard to kind of watch videos and be like, well, I can't do that. That doesn't fit into my lifestyle. And so I just want to say that these aren't going to work for everyone, but I just kind of want to share what has worked for me, like as a friend talking to a friend. I'm not a medical professional or a lactation consultant or anything like that. So please just take this, as you will, and let's get into it. So the first tip that I have it written down here, so sorry if I look down. The first tip that I have is starting in the beginning. In the first 6 weeks, you really want to nurse on demand, nurse as often as the baby wants when they want to do all of the cluster feedings, and to not give a bottle or a pacifier in those first 6 weeks, and to not pump in those first 6 weeks at all either. Because the thing that can happen is in those first 6 weeks is when your body is like figuring out, okay, do I have one baby? Do I have two babies? Do I have no baby? Do I have three babies? How many babies do I have? How much do I need for them? And so if you're interfering by, say, pumping because you're trying to get your milk to come in faster, what that's telling your body is that you actually need more milk. Your baby's drinking more than they actually are. And that can create an oversupply, which sounds good in theory, but it really isn't, and you really don't want to have to deal with that. So no pumping in the first 6 weeks. And then as far as like the binky and the bottle goes, the thing with that is just that, if you're trying to comfort, you think, well, they just ate, I'm just gonna give them the binky just so that they can go to sleep and be comforted. Well, every suck that they do on the binky is like, should have been done on you, and it just can make your supply not as high as it needs to be for your baby, because your baby is kind of getting soothed and being like, okay, well, I got this binky, then I guess I'm fine, when in reality they would have preferred to be latched onto you and maybe gotten a little bit more milk, and if not, then just at least sent that message to your body that they would have liked more milk. So that's kind of the first, like when you get home, when you're really trying to establish your supply, that's really the most important time to make sure your supply is like strong, and not even that it needs to be like this crazy supply, but just exactly what your baby needs. So those are my tips for the very beginning. And then my next tip is to have a really strong why. Why do you want to breastfeed your baby? Why do you hope to make it to a year or 2 years or 6 months or 3 months or whatever your goal is? Having a really strong why and reminding yourself of that when it gets tough is really important. For me, I know that it was just for the nutrition and the health benefits. I really wanted to be able to breastfeed for as long as I could, and it was really important to me, as well as not wanting to buy formula and do all of that. So in my head, it kind of was like, there's no other option, like I'm gonna breastfeed him. And so that's not to shame any other moms or anything. Like I said, this is just my experience. And so for me, I had a really strong why in my head of like, there's no other option, basically. So that can kind of help, because there are gonna be tough moments, especially around like the 3-4 month mark, which I will talk about in a little bit. But just keeping the motivation of why in the back of your head. So another thing that was really helpful to me is to make sure I stayed hydrated and that I was really being aware of my mineral intake and my electrolytes. So I know a lot of people say, like just drink a bunch of water, and really you want to be careful not to drink too much water. You don't want to overhydrate yourself, but I think the key to your milk supply, to hydration in general, is really the minerals. Your body, your cells need to be able to absorb the fluids that you're drinking, and if you're just chugging a bunch of water and you're actually flushing more minerals out that way, then it's just going right through you and your body's not able to absorb it and use it correctly. So for me, what I did was I added like pinches of Redmond's real salt into my water, or I would do like lemon water with salt, or coconut water is amazing. To this day, every single morning I drink a mix of like half coconut water, half orange juice with a pinch of salt in it. Raw milk, bone broth are all really, really amazing for actually hydrating your body and helping with your milk supply. So I know there's a lot of things out there like oatmeal and different teas and just like a bunch of stuff that tries to sell to new moms about like increasing your milk supply. I don't know. Truly, the main things are supply and demand. If your baby is demanding it, which is what I was talking about in those first 6 weeks, just really feeding on demand, because it's all about supply and demand and hydration, really. I mean, and even just supply and demand is like number one, like, which brings me to my next point of night feeds. I know it's hard and you're tired and you want to get rid of the night feeds as soon as possible, but I'm still feeding my son at night like 2 times is like the best night ever to like 6 times. I don't know, like every hour, not every hour, but like I'm still feeding him a lot at night. And your milk producing hormone is the highest at night. And really, sometimes if you're seeing a dip in like the afternoon or the late evening, that's a result of not getting adequate like milk removal overnight. So if your baby already is sleeping through the night on its own, then congratulations, that's wonderful. And maybe consider pumping, waking up once or twice a night to pump if you're really having issues with your supply and you're wanting to bring it up. If you're fine and you're good and you're like 7, 8, 9, 10 months in and your supply is fine and your baby's fine and sleeping through the night, then I really wouldn't worry about it. You sound like you're doing amazing. But if you're looking for something that maybe is causing you to have a low supply, if you truly are, then the nighttime feedings are really, really helpful and normal for your baby. So those are my first few little tips, and then I wanted to talk about what low milk supply looks like, what can kind of come up that looks like low supply that happened to me that actually wasn't low supply. So one of the most important thing to look at is the weight gain of your baby. If your baby is gaining weight and growing on their growth curve, then you really don't, that's all the evidence you need right there. You don't need to have a super chunky fat baby to know that they're getting enough milk. They just need to be growing appropriately. Another thing to look for to make sure that your baby is actually getting milk, because I know sometimes it can be like, are they getting milk? Are they just sucking? Like, it's hard to tell. You can hear them swallowing when they're getting milk. It kind of sounds like a soft like C sound. So listening to that is another indication that your baby is actually drinking milk. You can get a baby scale, and you can weigh them before feeding and after feeding if you're concerned about how much they're getting. I used to do that, and honestly, I think that people think babies need more breast milk than they do. My son, sometimes his full feeding was 2 ounces. For breastfed babies, it could be anywhere from like 2 to 5 ounces is completely normal for a feeding, and sometimes people think they need to get like 8 ounces for their baby, and they don't. It's not the same as like formula where it needs to increase, because your milk is always changing and adapting to what your baby needs. The amount doesn't have to go up. It just becomes higher in calories and more whatever they need as they change and grow. So don't think like, oh, I weighed my baby and they only had 2 ounces. That's totally fine. My baby did that and he's growing perfectly and there's no issues. Like every baby's different. So that's a completely normal number. Oh, another thing I wanted to touch on, this is kind of my last little point, is that when we were at it was like 3 to 4 month mark, my son did something called a nursing strike, which is like the scariest thing, because he would go like 6 hours without wanting to latch or drink at all. Like he would get mad. He would get so mad if I tried to latch him. And I was like, well, I know he's got to be hungry. He's gone like so long, you know? But I remember thinking in the back of my head, well, he does so many night feedings. Maybe he's like reverse, which can be a thing, kind of like reverse cycling, where they'll have more at night and not during the day. But it just wasn't normal for him. And just the way he was so upset when I would even try to offer him milk was like really scary. And I was like, I honestly at that point was like, well, I guess I have to just like pump and give him a bottle from here on out, or like, and then my supply is probably not going to last because it's hard to keep your supply up while you're pumping, and then I'm going to have to end up doing formula. And I just thought like my breastfeeding journey was ending, and it wasn't. It's a totally normal thing. It can happen. There's a list of reasons why it can happen. Something going on with the baby or something going on with the mom, like if you changed your body wash, or if you've gotten your period back and your milk can taste a little bit different during certain times of your cycle. Whatever it is, there's like, you can look it up online. There's like lists of reasons that could be happening. Maybe your baby's teething, or they're sick or something. But if this is happening, and it's like, the difference between like your baby truly trying to wean is that weaning is gradual, and a nursing strike is like really abrupt. All of a sudden they don't want any milk. They don't want anything to do with it. That's a nursing strike. And my tips for that is we just tried. We just kept trying. Another thing is I tried to like, tried like latching him on and nursing him while I was like standing up and walking around. That helped a lot. I'd say that was like one of the number one things that helped. Also like laying down and doing sideline nursing was really helpful. I've heard people having success of like going in the bath and doing skin to skin in the bath, and they're nice and relaxed and they'll latch on in there. But just keep trying. What I did, which I don't know if I recommend this, but it worked, was I would just pump and then give him a bottle. And then, you know, every feeding, I would still offer him to like nurse him first. And if he wouldn't, then I'd pump and give him a bottle, because I was scared of my supply being affected by going like 6 hours and not eating. And then eventually it just was over, and more he would latch on when I offered in the first place. And I want to say that lasted like maybe a few days to like a week. And I think it happened twice. The second time wasn't as bad as the first time. And I kind of was like, okay, he's done this before, but it can be really scary. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your supply or that they're getting mad because you don't have milk. It's just something that can happen for babies. And another thing around the same time, the 3 to 4 month mark, which can seem like you have low milk supply when you don't, is that your milk does regulate. So if you were leaking before, you might stop leaking. If you always like felt your let down and your boobs just felt like really full a lot of the time, and now they feel more empty, that's really normal around the 3 to 4 month mark. And that's just your body regulating and being like, getting out of the newborn phase and being like, okay, I know now how much milk my baby needs, and it just makes like the perfect amount. So you're never like having those like rock hard, engorged, painful boobs anymore. It like starts to go away, and it can seem like, oh, my milk's gone away, but it hasn't. That's just normal. And so yes, I have one more thing that I just remembered that I want to say, which is just because your baby is eating more often than the people tell you that they need to eat. People think that it's like every 3 hours. My son always has just fed on demand, and sometimes it's every hour, and they're short little feedings. Sometimes he does a long feeding and then he can go like 3 hours. But just because they're doing like the cluster feeding, or it just seems like they're feeding more than they should be, doesn't mean you have a low milk supply. That's just normal for some babies. Some babies like to go every 3 hour and be on a schedule, and some babies don't. So if your baby is gaining weight and you know that you hear them swallowing and everything, it's totally fine and normal, and not an indication that you have a low supply just because they're feeding more often than you think they should be. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any other questions, you can leave them in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Again, I make videos about motherhood and pregnancy and Montessori and gentle parenting and just all of that stuff. So if you're interested in any of that, please subscribe. I'm going to continue to make more videos, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks. Bye.